The cough was dry, brittle, like autumn leaves underfoot, yet it echoed with a chilling wetness. It wasn't just a cough, it was a harbinger, a guttural prelude to something unseen, something sinister blooming in the humid air of Miami. Detective Isabella Izzy Diaz, leaning against the yellow tape barricading a nondescript warehouse in Little Havana, shivered despite the Florida heat. The air hung thick, not just with moisture, but with an unspoken dread that clung to the back of her throat, mirroring the phantom cough she suddenly felt rising within her. Inside, hazmat suits moved like spectral figures, their muffled voices, the only sound cutting through the oppressive silence after the initial frantic sirens had faded. Something was deeply wrong, far beyond the usual drug bust gone sideways. Jax Stone, known to most as The Rock, but to those in the shadowed corners of global threats as simply Stone, felt the tremor in the ground before he heard the distant sirens. He was miles away, perched on the rooftop of a South Beach hotel, the turquoise expanse of the Atlantic stretching before him like a calming balm. He was supposed to be on vacation, a rare moment of respite after dismantling a human trafficking ring in Eastern Europe that had left him bone-weary and soul-tired. But vacation and Jax Stone rarely coexisted for long. His senses, honed by years of navigating danger, were screaming. It was a subtle shift in the city's rhythm, a discord in the usual vibrant symphony of Miami. He'd learned to trust that instinct, forged in the crucible of a past he rarely spoke of, a past that had carved responsibility into his very DNA. That past was a raw wound, still tender despite the years. He saw his younger brother, Mikey, his bright eyes dimming, his laughter fading, stolen away by a virulent strain of meningitis that had swept through their neighborhood like wildfire. The frantic rush to the hospital, the doctor's helpless shrugs, the crushing weight of loss. It was all etched in his memory. Mikey's death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a stark lesson in vulnerability, in the fragility of life when faced with unseen enemies. It ignited a fire in Jax, a relentless drive to protect, to prevent, to stand as a bulwark against the forces that preyed on the innocent and the unprepared. His strength wasn't just physical. It was a fortress built on the bricks of grief and fueled by a burning commitment to safeguard others from similar pain. He scanned the city skyline, his gaze sharp and focused, despite the relaxed posture he maintained. The sirens grew louder, converging towards the industrial outskirts of Little Havana. Something significant was unfolding. He pulled out his encrypted comms device, his fingers moving with practiced ease. A single tap connected him to his network, a constellation of trusted contacts scattered across the globe, each a specialist in their own domain. "Stone here," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried an undercurrent of steel. "Miami. Something's brewing in Little Havana." Hazmat response. "Dig deep. Biohazard potential." The response was immediate, a silent flurry of digital activity that rippled across continents. Jax knew he couldn't afford to wait for official channels, for bureaucratic red tape. His gut screamed urgency. He remembered Mikey's rapid decline, the agonizing slowness of the system to react. He wouldn't make that mistake again. This time, he would move fast, but he would also move smart. Patience, he reminded himself, a lesson he was still learning, still grappling with against his natural inclination to charge headfirst into danger. But patience, he knew, was the scalpel, while impulsiveness was the blunt hammer. And sometimes, the scalpel was the only way to cut through the layers of deception and reach the festering core. He descended from the rooftop, a silent predator, drawn to the scent of trouble, his gaze fixed on the growing plume of emergency lights painting the Miami sky. This vacation was officially over. It was time to work. Izzy Diaz met Jax at the edge of the police perimeter, her usually vibrant eyes shadowed with fatigue and worry. She recognized him instantly, the legend preceding him like a thunderclap. "Stone," she said, a hint of awe in her voice, quickly, replaced by the professional urgency of the situation. "Detective Diaz, Miami PD, we've got something nasty in there." She gestured towards the warehouse, the hazmat team still moving with slow, deliberate steps. "Initial scans are off the charts for, well, we're not sure yet, but it's biological. Definitely not good." Jax nodded, his gaze sweeping over the scene, taking in every detail. The warehouse was nondescript, deliberately blending into the urban sprawl. No obvious signs of forced entry, suggesting someone on the inside or someone very skilled. "Smuggling operation?" he asked, his voice calm, probing. "Looks like it," Izzy confirmed. "But not drugs, not weapons. Empty crates labeled medical supplies, but something leaked." One of our officers, first on scene, started showing symptoms within minutes. High fever, violent coughing, disorientation. She paused, a grimace, tightening her lips. "They've quarantined him. We're trying to contain it, but you don't know what it is," Jax finished for her, "and containment is already compromised." He saw the fear in her eyes, the raw, visceral fear that mirrored the city's growing unease. News reports were starting to filter out, vague mentions of a public health incident, designed to avoid panic but failing miserably. Social media was already ablaze with speculation, conspiracy theories, and panicked pronouncements. Jax moved closer to the perimeter, his senses straining, trying to discern any trace, any clue in the air. "Diaz, I need access, now." His tone was firm, not demanding, but carrying the weight of authority born of experience. Izzy, despite her initial apprehension, recognized that authority. She saw not just the muscle and the reputation, but the focused intensity in his eyes, the quiet determination that radiated from him. She made a quick call, pulling rank, cutting through the bureaucratic hesitation. Within minutes, a hazmat suit was produced, and Jax was stepping through the barrier, Izzy right behind him, a standard-issue mask covering her face. Inside the warehouse, the stench was faint but unsettling, a metallic tang overlaid with a sickly sweet odor that made Jax's stomach churn. Crates were scattered, some open, revealing empty vials, others still sealed with cryptic symbols. The hazmat team was meticulously collecting samples, their movements slow and deliberate, a stark contrast to Jax's usual rapid pace. He forced himself to slow down, to observe, to absorb. Patience, he reminded himself. This wasn't a brawl. It was a puzzle, a deadly game of chess. He focused on the vials, the symbols. He recognized them. A stylized serpent coiled around a caduceus, a symbol used by a shadowy organization known as Serpent's Kiss. They weren't just smugglers. They were bioweapon specialists, notorious for their ruthlessness and their penchant for chaos. This wasn't about profit. It was about something far more sinister. Back outside, Izzy's phone rang. Her face paled as she listened, her voice barely a whisper. They found something else. At the officer's apartment. More vials. And a manifesto. Serpent's Kiss. They're not just smuggling. They're planning a release. Testing it. Here. Miami. The air seemed to thicken, the dread solidifying into a cold, hard knot in Jax's gut. Testing. On. Ordinary people. Global chaos. He felt a surge of anger, the impulsive urge to lash out, to hunt them down and make them pay. But he resisted it, forcing himself to breathe, to think. Impulsiveness had its place, but strategy was paramount. He needed to understand their plan, their motive, their weaknesses. "Diaz," he said, his voice low and urgent. "We need to find Serpent's Kiss. Every lead you have, every contact, every whisper. We don't have much time. This isn't just a smuggling operation. This is an attack." He looked at her, his eyes burning with intensity. "And we are going to stop them. Patiently. Methodically. And we are going to make them regret ever setting foot in this city." He knew deep down that this was more than just stopping a gang. This was about protecting the city, protecting the memory of Mikey, protecting the world from descending into chaos. This was about responsibility, etched in blood and loss, now driving him forward with unwavering purpose. Days blurred into a frantic chase. Jax and Izzy, an unlikely but formidable duo, worked tirelessly, fueled by adrenaline and a shared sense of urgency. Izzy's street smarts and local network, combined with Jax's global reach and strategic mind, proved to be a potent combination. They followed a trail of digital breadcrumbs, intercepted encrypted communications, and pieced together the Serpent's Kiss plan. The virus, codenamed Chimera, was designed to be highly contagious, mimicking flu symptoms initially, before escalating into a deadly respiratory failure. Their plan was to release it in a densely populated area, observe its spread, and then unleash a more weaponized version globally, holding the world hostage for their twisted ideology of purification. They tracked the gang to a secluded research facility, hidden beneath a seemingly abandoned fish processing plant in the Everglades. Time was running out. Chimera was ready for deployment. Jax knew they had to act, and act now. But rushing in blindly was not an option. The facility was likely booby-trapped, heavily guarded, and contained the very weapon they were trying to prevent from being unleashed. Patience, he reminded himself, even as his every instinct screamed for immediate action. He devised a plan, meticulous and risky. A three-pronged assault. Izzy and her team would create a diversion at the front entrance, drawing the guards' attention. His tech contact, a young prodigy named Anya, would attempt a cyber infiltration, disabling security systems and gaining access to internal schematics. And Jax, using his expertise in covert operations, would infiltrate through a less defended access point, aiming directly for the lab where Chimera was stored. The plan unfolded with agonizing slowness. The diversion worked, drawing heavy fire towards the front entrance. Anya, working remotely, battled through layers of digital security, her fingers flying across the keyboard, beads of sweat forming on her brow. Jax, meanwhile, navigated the swampy terrain, his movements fluid and silent like a predator stalking its prey. He bypassed laser grids, neutralized surveillance cameras, and took down sentries with swift, decisive strikes. He reached the lab just as Anya cracked the final firewall, granting him access to the facility schematics. Inside, the lab was sterile, cold, and humming with ominous machinery. At the center, encased in a reinforced containment unit, was Chimera, a vial of viscous emerald green liquid, radiating an almost palpable sense of menace. Standing guard was the leader of Serpent's Kiss, a gaunt, intense man known only as the Serpent, his eyes burning with fanatical zeal. "You are too late, Stone," the Serpent hissed, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Chimera is ready. Miami will be the first lesson. The world will follow." He reached for a detonator, a small device that Jax knew would trigger the release mechanism, unleashing the virus into the ventilation system. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Jax lunged, but the Serpent was faster, his finger hovering over the detonator button. A tense standoff. Jax knew a direct assault could shatter the containment unit, releasing Chimera prematurely, a catastrophe he couldn't risk. He needed to be patient, to find an opening, a weakness. He noticed a small control panel near the Serpent, regulating the lab's temperature and pressure, vital for Chimera's stability. "You misunderstand, Serpent," Jax said, his voice low and steady, masking the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Lessons are earned, not inflicted. And patience. Patience is a weapon you clearly lack." He feigned a move to his left, drawing the Serpent's attention. Then in a lightning-fast motion he pivoted and slammed his fist into the control panel, sending sparks flying and plunging the lab into a state of chaotic instability. Alarms blared, the containment unit began to shudder, and Chimera within started to react to the sudden temperature fluctuations. The Serpent roared in frustration, momentarily distracted. Jax seized the opportunity, tackling him, wresting the detonator from his grasp. A brutal struggle ensued, a clash of raw power and fanatical desperation. Jax, despite taking a vicious blow to the ribs, fought with controlled fury, his patience now channeled into focused, relentless action. He disarmed the Serpent, pinning him to the ground, the detonator clattering harmlessly away. But the containment unit was failing. Warning lights flashed red, sirens wailed, and a hairline fracture snaked across the reinforced glass. Chimera was about to breach. Jax had a choice: secure the Serpent and risk a full breach, or focus solely on containing the virus. He made a split-second decision, a sacrifice born of responsibility. He left the Serpent momentarily restrained. and with a desperate surge of strength, he grabbed a heavy emergency containment shield, slamming it against the fracturing unit, buying precious seconds. He could feel the heat radiating from the failing containment, the pressure building. He was injured, exposed, and running out of time. But he held the shield firm, his muscles screaming, his resolve unwavering. He had to hold on, just a little longer, until Izzy and her team could secure the facility and bring in specialized containment units. Patience, he repeated in his mind, not as a passive virtue, but as an active force, a shield against panic, a weapon against despair. He held on, enduring the pain, the risk, the crushing weight of responsibility, until the reinforcements arrived, the sirens growing louder, signaling salvation and the end of the immediate threat. The aftermath was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Hazmat teams swarmed the facility, securing Chimera in mobile containment units. The Serpent and his remaining gang members were apprehended, their twisted plan foiled at the 11th hour. Izzy, her face streaked with grime but her eyes shining with relief, reached Jax as he emerged from the lab, supported by 2 medics. He was bruised, bleeding from a gash on his arm and coughing but alive. You did it, Stone," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "You actually did it." She saw the exhaustion etched on his face, the pain in his eyes, but also the quiet satisfaction of a job done, a crisis averted. Jax managed a weak smile, wincing as he moved. "We did it, Diaz. Teamwork." He coughed again, a deep, racking cough that worried the medics. Just, a bit winded. The city breathed a collective sigh of relief. The news, initially panicked and fragmented, gradually shifted to a narrative of heroism and resilience. Mayor Thompson, visibly shaken but composed, addressed the city, praising the swift action of law enforcement and a private security consultant who had played a pivotal role. Jax's name wasn't mentioned publicly, his preference for operating in the shadows respected. But the city knew, in its collective gut, that someone extraordinary had stood between them and disaster. In the days that followed, the rhythm of Miami slowly returned to normal, but with a subtle shift, a newfound appreciation for the fragility of normalcy. The fear subsided, replaced by a sense of gratitude and a quiet understanding of the unseen dangers that lurked beneath the surface of their vibrant lives. Izzy visited Jax in the makeshift medical facility set up near the Everglades. He was recovering, slowly but steadily. The cough persisted, a lingering reminder of the close call, but the fever had broken, and the color was returning to his face. "They're saying it was Chimera exposure," Izzy said, her voice subdued. "Low level, but you were exposed." She looked at him, her eyes filled with concern. "You risked everything, Stone, for a city you barely know." Jax looked out at the vast expanse of the Everglades, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. "It's not just about the city, Diaz," he said, his voice raspy but firm. "It's about responsibility. We all have it, to each other, to our communities, to the world." He paused, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "I learned that lesson a long time ago. The hard way." He didn't elaborate, but Izzy sensed the unspoken grief, the personal loss that fueled his unwavering commitment. "You were patient," Izzy observed, thinking back to his methodical approach, his refusal to rush in blindly. "Despite everything, you were patient." Jax nodded slowly. "Patience isn't weakness, Diaz. It's strength, it's discipline. It's knowing when to hold back, when to observe, when to strategize. Impulsiveness can get you killed. Patience can save lives." He looked at her, a faint smile gracing his lips. "And sometimes, it can even teach a few lessons, along the way." The cough racked him again, but this time, it didn't sound quite as brittle, as ominous. It sounded like a cough of recovery, of healing, of a city slowly breathing again. Weeks later, Miami was vibrant again, the near disaster fading into a cautionary tale, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. The news reports had moved on, replaced by the usual cacophony of daily life. But beneath the surface, something had shifted. People looked at each other differently with a newfound awareness of their shared vulnerability and their interconnectedness. The city had been tested, and it had emerged stronger, bound together by the invisible threads of collective experience and shared relief. Jax, fully recovered, stood on the same South Beach rooftop where his vacation had abruptly ended. The Atlantic stretched before him, calm and serene, reflecting the clear blue sky. He was no longer bone-weary, but filled with a quiet sense of purpose, a renewed commitment to his mission. He had learned again the value of patience, not just as a tactical approach, but as a fundamental principle, a way of navigating the complexities of a dangerous world. Izzy joined him on the rooftop, a steaming cup of Cuban coffee in her hand. "Mayor Thompson sends his regards," she said, handing him the coffee. "And, well, the entire city, I think. They know. They may not know your name, but they know what you did." Jax took a sip of the coffee, the rich aroma filling his senses. "It wasn't just me, Diaz. It was all of us. You, your team, Anya, the medics, the hazmat crews. Everyone played their part." He looked out at the city, the bustling streets, the vibrant life flowing through its veins. That's what responsibility is, isn't it? Everyone doing their part, patiently, diligently to protect what matters. Izzy nodded, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You changed things, Stone. Not just in Miami. In me, too. I used to be all about action, immediate results. Now, I see the value in taking a breath, in thinking, in being patient." She smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes. "Maybe I'm learning to be a little more like The Rock." Jax chuckled, a low rumble that echoed across the rooftop. "Maybe, Diaz, or maybe you're just learning to be a better version of yourself. And that's all any of us can ask for." He looked at her, his gaze steady and sincere. "The fight's not over, you know. Serpent's kiss is just a symptom. There will always be threats, dangers lurking in the shadows. But as long as we remember the lessons, as long as we act with responsibility and patience, we have a fighting chance." He took another sip of his coffee, the Miami sun warming his face, the gentle breeze carrying the sounds of the city below. The leftover challenge remained, the knowledge that the world was still a dangerous place, but he faced it not with fear, but with resolve, with the quiet strength of patience and the unwavering commitment of responsibility. The Rock stood tall, not just as a symbol of physical power, but as a testament to the enduring strength of the human will and the quiet heroism of those who choose to protect, to serve, and to stand as a bulwark against the darkness, one patient, responsible step at a time.